What's good? It's Woog. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel if you are into the fight talk. We've got Alexander Povetkin, 36 wins, 2 losses, and 1 draw versus Dillian Whyte, 27 wins and 2 losses. And this is the rematch. And doesn't this one feel like it might be too soon for Dillian Whyte? I mean, I know it's been over 7 months since their first fight because of the COVID delays, but this is an immediate rematch in terms of the last thing Dillian Whyte will have seen in the ring as he enters this rematch is like the ceiling of the venue while he's on his back. He was flat on his back from one crushing Alexander Povetkin uppercut, which I had as my best knockout of 2020. But Alexander Povetkin is now 41 years old. So you'd think that we'd be getting close to the end, right? At least at an elite level. Plus, let's not act like Dillian Whyte wasn't winning that fight. Whyte was having his way in there. Dillian Whyte's jab controlled most of the action. He knocked Povetkin down twice in the 4th round. In fact, it was sounding like the fight might be stopped within the next round or two if things kept on going that way. Dillian Whyte was the better man for most of that fight. But when someone is delivering their punches with the intelligent setups and with the ferocity and power of Alexander Povetkin, then one punch can erase all of the mistakes of the past rounds. Povetkin is just one of those heavyweights that has the power and technique to just blank you. And this wasn't the first one-punch, walk-off home run that I'd seen Povetkin deliver. Wasn't that Povetkin who put Mike Perez to sleep in 2015? That was a first-round knockout too. But Dillian Whyte was winning this fight until he wasn't. Very sudden, very dramatic. Now, Dillian Whyte only had 1 loss heading into this first fight, and that was to Anthony Joshua. And that was also a fight that Dillian Whyte was doing very well in early. And Dillian Whyte responded to that knockout loss back in 2015 by winning his next 11 fights, including some quality wins over Derek Chisora twice. He beat Robert Helenius, the guy who just knocked out Robert Konachki. Whyte knocked Lucas Brown out. But his biggest win was against Joseph Parker, the former WBO champ, who, it seems, fights all of his elite opponents pretty evenly. Parker's only 2 losses were to Anthony Joshua and Dillian Whyte, and those were both very close fights. And Parker was also the first and, for a long time, only guy to beat Andy Ruiz, up until Ruiz lost the rematch to Joshua. But Whyte has had some quality wins, and he had just been knocking on the door as a mandatory title contender who was just waiting his turn, and then took this very dangerous chance, this fight versus Povetkin last summer. This was much more than a stay busy fight though, man. While a lot of the top fighters were either not fighting at all, or when they were fighting against like non-top 10 guys, especially in the earlier part of the pandemic. This was before Lomachenko versus the huge underdog Teofimo Lopez fight. Most of the top guys were just fighting anybody whose cost was low enough to put on a show without any crowd and without any pay-per-view. So Eddie Hearn makes his big pandemic splash, his return, with this dangerous fight for Dillian Whyte, who was the betting favorite and the higher ranked fighter between the two. Now, Povetkin is a former Olympic gold medalist and a 2-time world title challenger. He has held lesser titles, beating Ruslan Chagayev, but he has only challenged for a major title twice. First losing to Vladimir Klitschko back in 2013 via decision, and then to Anthony Joshua in 2018. Joshua's resume is really aging pretty well, by the way, isn't it? But Povetkin still has only those 2 losses in his 15-year career. He's experienced and is probably, again, one of the deadliest punchers in the game. He's got a crushing right hand, and that wasn't even the punch that he stopped Dillian Whyte with. That was a left uppercut. Beautifully set up, too. But yeah, look at the top 10 heavyweights and then compare their power to Povetkin's. He hits harder than Tyson Fury, right? AJ and him are close, but we could even give that one to AJ. Wilder hits harder than anyone with that right hand, so Wilder wins there. But then look at the next few. Povetkin hits harder than Dillian Whyte. Luis Ortiz, it's very close. But I've seen Povetkin fight and stop better opponents than I've seen Luis Ortiz fight and stop. Ortiz's best win is still probably versus Bryant Jennings in 2015, but let's say they're even. Just strictly power-wise, Povetkin hits harder than Andy Ruiz, in my opinion. Harder than Michael Hunter, the former cruiserweight, who actually fought Alexander Povetkin to a draw on that Joshua versus Ruiz 2, or should I say Ruiz versus Joshua 2 undercard, the rematch. And that Povetkin versus Hunter fight to a draw was very interesting to me. That actually had me wondering whether Michael Hunter is really this good, or if Povetkin was slipping a little, or starting to slip, age-wise. Then Povetkin, I would say, well, he hits harder than Oscar Rivas and Alexander Usyk, the former undisputed cruiserweight champ who captured all of the major belts before then knocking out Tony Bellew in Bellew's retirement fight, and then Usyk going up to heavyweight. So Povetkin hits harder than even most of the top 10 heavyweights. So going into this rematch versus Dillian Whyte, I'm thinking that round by round, that Whyte should still have the ability to win rounds. That, skill for skill today, he might have even caught up to and passed the 41-year-old Povetkin, just skill-wise. Again, ability to win rounds. Plus, again, don't forget, he knocked Povetkin down twice. But how does it play into Dillian Whyte's psyche that, man, like, I could be beating this guy, winning rounds, knocking him down, and he thinks, or better yet, he knows that he can plan, set up, and deliver a punch that'll shut my lights out. Hell, I know that that's the case, that he could shut my lights off. Now, obviously, we can assume that Dillian Whyte has too much mental resilience to fall prey to that type of negative thought. But man, 12 rounds is a long time to keep a guy from Povetkin from hurting you, especially if he's already knocked you out cold. So we know, or at least have a very good idea of what Povetkin's going to try to do. He's going to, jab, and then slip and explode. That's what he does. He'll duck his head and then explode with power shots. And he can ride that strategy and find success, and probably should stick to that strategy, because unless he was just out of shape for their last fight, I don't know about Povetkin's ability to, at this stage of his career, 41 years old, to play the role of round winner, where you're fighting a quality 3 minutes, the way that he used to be able to do versus guys like Marco Huck or versus Ruslan Chagayev for that lesser title in 2013. Or even as recently as August 2019 versus Tyson Fury's brother, Hughie Fury. So I coupled that line of thinking with the draw versus Michael Hunter, and I just don't know if Povetkin's as consistently skilled, quick, energetic, and reflexive enough to win rounds the way that he used to. He might actually need a knockout or stoppage here. And maybe it's just tough to, even picture him badly hurting somebody without finishing him, and then that fight going the distance and Povetkin gets his hand raised via decision. Usually when Povetkin has you hurt, it's all but over, because a couple quick punches will do it. We know this. Losing a fight versus Povetkin is usually not a pretty sight for the opponent. But yeah, I don't think Povetkin wins a decision if it's one of those chess match style fights versus Dillian Whyte. It's in 2021. Again, Dillian Whyte has beaten Joseph Parker and the current 10th ranked heavyweight Oscar Rivas via decision. So Povetkin will probably try taking Whyte's head off with some of his power punches, with most of his power punches. Meanwhile, what do you do if you're Dillian Whyte? Same thing as last fight, but hope for a better result? I still think that Dillian Whyte can win this fight via decision or via knockout. I picked Whyte to win via decision the last time, and I think that because of his good jab and his all-around solid skill set, if he isn't too in his head about his disastrous knockout loss, he could very well win this one. And you know what's funny here? He's actually a bigger betting favorite for this rematch than he was in their first fight, even after suffering that knockout loss. So maybe people haven't forgotten about how well Whyte was fighting prior to the knockout. I actually think he's got a good chance at stopping Povetkin here. He was well on his way to stopping him again in that first fight. But I think that I'm going the other way here. Look, Povetkin will get old at some point if he hasn't already, and his career will undoubtedly be over pretty soon. His own team is suggesting that the end of the road is near. But just because of his age, really, and the ring wear, not due to any results from his fights, because again, he only has those 2 losses to Klitschko and Joshua. But the end of the road does appear to be near. And before the knockout, it was looking like that first fight between Whyte and Povetkin might have been the beginning of the end for him. And maybe I should ride that logic into predicting a Dillian Whyte win. But the mental part of this game is just so important. And if Dillian Whyte can't get Povetkin out of there once he, has him hurt, or in the 3rd, 4th round and 5th round, then Povetkin will likely remain very dangerous. The problem is Whyte isn't the guy who will get you out of there without beating you up for several rounds. I just don't think he's elusive enough to keep an ambush-style monstrous puncher. Shout out to online boxing analyst Richard Dwyer on that ambush-style reference. But yeah, a monstrous puncher who knows that he could win the fight by finding ways to really set him up and blast him. Again, watch Povetkin's performance against Mike Perez, who was really surging in the division at that time. So I think I'm going Povetkin via stoppage here. Again, Povetkin is old. This won't last much longer. We'll see if that last knockout win was Povetkin's last golden moment. But I think he's got at least one more in him. I don't know how impacted he is from having COVID-19. This fight was postponed a bit. But I'm assuming he's at least similar in his abilities here as he was in his first underwhelming and outclassed, then suddenly turned sensational performance versus Whyte the first time. I think he'll catch up to Whyte again here, even if he falls behind on the scorecards early. Keep in mind, I'm watching that fight thinking, oh, Povetkin's going to get him. Povetkin's going to get him. Even though I had picked Whyte, I'm watching the fight and just knowing Povetkin's style, I'm like, dang, he's still dangerous in there. But he was getting worked. He was getting beaten up. But that was only in the course of 4 rounds. It felt like it was like the 7th or 8th round by the time Povetkin turned it around with that one punch. But it was only 4 rounds that Whyte was in control. So yeah, I'm going Povetkin via stoppage. And boy, this is a must-win fight for Dillian Whyte. It'll really be interesting to see how he performs here. If he does turn things around and get the big win here, it'll be one of his 2 best career wins, along with Joseph Parker. And it should set Dillian Whyte up for something big, because that's where he was headed prior to this knockout loss. So he should have a huge opportunity depending on how the heavyweight division sorts itself out in 2021. But yeah, Dillian Whyte must win this fight. But let me know your thoughts. Please leave your comments in the comments, like the video, subscribe to the channel if you are into the fight talk. I'm Woog. Thanks for tuning in.